Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about some of the crazy stuff that circulates out there in the fitness community and bizarre theories that people have. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And it's always funny because I'll make some of these videos and I do discuss diet, and I occasionally get people come in and like, oh, you're just like absurdly, mind-numbingly obese, even though I don't have a gut or anything. You shouldn't be giving diet advice when I'm actually just repeating what all the top experts in the field say, including multiple people who have advanced degrees in nutrition who prep bodybuilders for shows and who coach elite level athletes repeat the same. I'm just repeating them, yet somehow it's bad advice because I'm not bodybuilder ripped and I'm just a healthy body fat or 40-year-old man, which is what I am. It's always weird they had this idea. So instead, why don't you guys pretend it's Ronnie Coleman talking, telling you the same message, since apparently the messenger matters. So Ronnie Coleman came in and said, yeah, buddy, ate that pineapple, blueberries, mango, baked potatoes with no butter, and grilled chicken breast for Mr. Olympia contest prep. 7-time Mr. Olympia. It's all about the mangoes, dry potatoes, dry baked potatoes, and grilled chicken, and I don't put no barbecue sauce on it. Yeah, buddy? Then you guys would be talking about everything that I'm going to say in this video would be the key to getting ripped, according to you guys, which we're not talking about getting ripped anyways. We're talking about what causes obesity. But that's how people think. So just pretend Ronnie Coleman said that in that voice, and then, you'll get the message. So that kind of sums that up. So there you go. Ronnie Coleman, 7-time Mr. Olympia, will tell you dry potatoes and chicken breast and plain oats will get you ripped. Does anybody disagree with that? Like, does anybody in the top tiers of even coaching for physique not agree that that's probably some of the easiest foods to eat for people to get really, really lean? The reality is, so many people out there try to promote diets and blame the wrong foods. They blame grains for obesity and health problems. By the way, gluten allergies aren't real. That is a documented fact. The top allergens in the world are all saying they've never found a single documented case. Non-celiac gluten intolerance isn't real. We're not talking about people with wheat allergies because wheat's a specific food. It has nothing to do with gluten. But people are allergic to all sorts of foods, so that really is not what we're talking about. That doesn't really matter. Just because people are allergic to certain foods doesn't mean that gluten or anything is to blame. People get sidetracked on this silly stuff. Grains are not to blame for the obesity epidemic. Fruits not to blame for the obesity epidemic. Potatoes are not to blame for the obesity epidemic. In fact, countries that predominantly eat those foods as staples don't have obesity. It's an almost non-existent statistic. So what's really going on? What is universally agreed by the top experts in the entire Western world? What really is causing obesity besides being sedentary? Being sedentary is a big factor. Let's be realistic here. More people have sedentary jobs. People talk about the really poor oftentimes being obese too. Yeah, the really poor oftentimes don't work at all. And if you don't have a job and you don't exercise, you do nothing, obviously your chances of becoming obese are pretty high. But what are the food issues? It's pretty straightforward. Instead of saying it's a given substance, what's generally agreed is there are entire categories of food. How would you describe the foods that most promote obesity? Hyperpalatable, calorically dense foods. All right, I'm going to repeat that. The top experts agree the foods that contribute most are hyperpalatable, calorically dense foods. Hyperpalatable means foods that stimulate appetite. All right, foods that when you eat them, it's really easy to eat a lot of that food in one sitting because they tend to taste very good. Meaning, you take a big thing of Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever, and you drink a large amount of it, it's easy to drink a lot of that, right? It's hyperpalatable. It tastes sweet. They add extra sodium to make it salty, so it makes you a little thirstier. It's very easy to sit down and consume an entire bottle, a 16-ounce bottle of any fully sweetened beverage, right? Any soda. It's really easy to consume that. Well, that is extremely calorically dense. How about foods with a lot of fat in them? How about foods with a lot of refined sugars in them? People will say, oh, well, I crave sweets, but then you look at what they're calling sweets. They don't mean candy with just sugar in it. Sweets doesn't mean a big block of sugar. It doesn't mean a sugar cube. people say sweets and they're blaming the refined carbs and stuff in there. It's usually foods that have both a large amount of table sugar and a lot of fat in them. Go look at the average slice of pie, the average slice of cake, even ice cream. Unless it's a light ice cream, look at the amount of fat combined with the amount of sugar in those foods. Well, humans crave three things. There's three things that are palatable to us, right? And these are the foods that keep us from starving to death in the wild. And that's going to be sweet, salty, and fatty. Well, most of the things that people think of as sweets, which are hyper palatable, have a lot of sugar and a lot of fat combined together. They're hitting two of your most important taste receptors. All right, they taste delicious. They taste delicious. You combine sweet and fat together, that's what most people think of as sweets. So, and they tend to be very calorically dense because you take sugars of any type, refined sugars with no fiber in them, they're dry, there's no water added, like a piece of fruit. Yeah, it's got a lot of sugar in it, but it also has fiber and it usually has a lot of water. All right, they are not as easy to overconsume as something that you've just dumped sugar in. It's not anywhere near as easy to consume, and they don't combine a lot of fat with it. You go compare a giant watermelon, a 1,500 calorie watermelon's this big. All right, yeah, you can eat a whole watermelon in one day. I've done it plenty of times. But compare that to 1,500 calories of cookies or pie. All right, it's not the sugars in isolation in a high fiber food, or at least some fiber in it with a bunch of water in it, that's causing people to overeat. Because you can't anywhere near as easily eat a 1,500 calorie watermelon. In fact, if you eat a full 1,500 calorie watermelon, your stomach's going to come out about 4 or 5 inches further from where it normally does. But you can eat a 1,500 calorie pie easily. I mean, you go look at the calories on sometimes an apple pie this big around, there'll be 2,500, 3,000 calories in it. All right? You eat half that pie, sometimes you've eaten as much calories as in a watermelon this big. So yeah, it's hyper palatable foods. It's adding extra fats to everything. It's adding butter on top of everything. Butter doesn't have much satiety. You add butter on top of anything, you're going to increase the caloric load very, very quickly. You add oils to anything, oils are calorically dense, hyper palatable. You cook a food in oil, it's easy to double or triple the calories sometimes. Don't believe me, go compare fried chicken to grilled chicken breast. The same quantity of meat, same weight, and look at the calories. It's easily double, and it's all fat calories. It's calorically dense. They both take up the same amount of space in the stomach. And which one tastes better? The fried one does. It tastes a lot better. It's easier to eat a larger volume of it, and it usually has twice as many calories for the same amount of volume. So you can easily eat 2.5 times, if not 3 times the amount of calories of that same chicken in one sitting. All right, it's not lean proteins, it's not grains, it's not potatoes, it's not fruit that are contributing to the obesity epidemic. It's all these hyper palatable foods that are really calorically dense. All right, really fatty cuts of meat are easy to overconsume. Now, a bunch of the ketogenic diet people are going to say, why are you blaming fat? Well, because it's easy to overeat fat. The only reason ketogenic diets work is that they don't suppress appetite through stomach filling. They suppress appetite by the production of ketones. Ketones are mildly nauseating. They can blunt appetite a little bit. Furthermore, ketogenic diets, most people who follow a ketogenic diet only get to eat 5 or 6 different foods. When you eat the same foods over and over and over and over 6, 7 days a week, you start eating less of them over time because you get bored with those foods. Boring foods that you're bored of eating, you over time consume less of them. The more variety that's in your diet, the more calories you're likely to consume. But in that case, those are foods that would normally contribute very largely to obesity, but because you're eating them in isolation and you have the presence of more ketones, they can be appetite suppressing. No one's saying ketogenic diets don't work, but if you don't understand that trying to eat a normal diet, when you start adding extra butter and extra oils, and even ketogenic diet followers know that most oils and cooking in oils probably isn't the best thing in the world. All of the people who follow those believe that. Even Dr. Adkins told you the same thing, and he promoted these diets. He's the one who popularized these. He's the first one to tell you these foods are the problem. Don't go cooking your foods in a bunch of oil. Don't fry your foods in oil. Even he tells you that. Again, it will make them hyper palatable and increase the caloric density. But fats in general do that. Slapping butter on stuff can bring the calories through the roof. It can dramatically increase the calories from fat, increase the caloric density, and make the foods more hyperpalatable. People are like, well, these muffins taste better with butter on them. Yeah, so you're going to eat more of them, and you've dramatically increased their calories. You take sometimes a 300 calorie muffin and you put a big a slab of butter on it, you've increased it to 400 calories, and you've made it easier to eat. And you're more likely to consume 2 of them than 1 of them because it tastes even better, because you've now combined all 3 of the hyperpalatable sensations, and that's sweet, fatty, and salty, because the butter is fatty and salty and you just threw it on top of something sweet. Yeah, of course it tastes better, but don't complain when you start gaining a lot of extra body fat, because you've created a hyperpalatable problem. And that's the same thing, potatoes just fine. When you start slathering it in butter, you put a salty, fatty thing on it. Potatoes themselves have been found to be one of the highest satiety carbohydrates known to man. People who go on mostly potatoes struggle to overeat. They struggle to gain weight. That's been noted in monotype diets. Potatoes have one of the highest satieties. They're not fattening. They're hard to overeat until you start deep frying them in vegetable oil, which makes them taste 5 times better, and it usually doubles the amount of calories in them. Well, yeah, that's different, but it's not the potatoes, it's the oil. Same thing with the baked potato. Maybe it's all the sour cream and the butter that you've added to it that's the problem, and the experts would all agree with that. Same thing, sugary drinks will dramatically increase your caloric load. They will dramatically increase your caloric intake without having much satiety. They don't fill you up very well. All right, these foods are the problems, and it's insane that we sit around blaming the foods that when societies eat those as their staples, obesity, heart disease, diabetes, these things almost disappear within those cultures, yet people want to blame those instead of looking at the sources. It's really obvious what the sources are of obesity to anyone with basic common sense, and the fact that anyone can be convinced of anything else when the data is overwhelming, the common sense is overwhelming. You eat a bunch of sweet, fatty foods, you throw a bunch of refined sugars or a bunch of extra fat on top of foods, you're going to overeat a lot easier. And you're getting foods that aren't particularly nutritious because you're adding a lot of calories that are coming without much in the way of vitamins and minerals by adding those things to them. All right, it's really easy to overeat foods that are high in fat or high in refined sugars. It's just really, really easy to overeat. And these foods are the ones that contribute the most to obesity, diabetes, all these other problems. This isn't difficult to figure out. So it's insane that people want to blame stuff like grains when, again, look at a lot of Asian countries that eat 70% of their calories from white rice. Does obesity exist? Does diabetes exist in those cultures? No, they're very rare. They exist, but in very, very tiny ratios compared to what we get in the Western world. White rice isn't the problem because they're eating nothing but white rice, vegetables, little fish, little chicken, little pork. Countries that do that, even though they might have unlimited white rice, they don't have these problems. These foods are not the problem. It's foods that are easy to overconsume, that stimulate appetite, that taste amazing, that are loaded full of extra calories. And they don't always have to be refined foods, but refined foods are pretty high on that list. And so again, understanding the problem, those are your problems. It's hyper palatable, calorically dense foods that are causing obesity. It's not potatoes. It's not oats. It's not rice. It's not fruit. It's not bananas. It's not watermelon that are causing people to be morbidly obese. It's all this other garbage. Okay? It's McDonald's. It's the soda. It's the pies. It's the cakes. It's the ice cream, the cookies, slapping butter on everything, slapping extra sugar on everything, frying foods in oils. That's what's causing these health problems. That's what's causing the obesity epidemic. And the evidence for this is mind-numbingly overwhelming. That anyone even denies it and doesn't understand it and even goes and writes books and promotes anything different than this is literally not only insane, but quite possibly criminal in its nature. Like, these people are legitimate con men who I'm surprised they can look at themselves in the mirror at night. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.